What do you think of when you hear of the Rocks Pirates? If you're a One Piece fan, then you probably think of the most powerful crew that ever existed. It took Goldie Roger, the Pirate King himself, teaming up with the Marine hero Garp, who by the way earned his hero title in that battle, to finally stop them. And even so, it was arguably their lack of chemistry and camaraderie that led to their downfall, and not any lack of strength. All of the names of the members of the Rocks Pirates carry a lot of weight. In fact, 3 of the former 4 Yonko were underlings in this crew, and another Yonko named his pirate ship after Rocks Zebek, and all that is just the tip of the iceberg. So make sure to stay tuned, since we'll be going deep into this, the hypest of crews in the history of One Piece. If you do enjoy these One Piece videos and want to keep them coming, chill Pirate King within and smash that like button until you see fireworks. And if you haven't joined the Nakama today, make this the video by hitting that subscribe button and hitting that notification bell to turn on all notifications so you don't miss future One Piece videos and updates. Now I want to thank today's sponsor, Honkai Star Rail, the brand new RPG made by Hoyoverse, the makers of Genshin Impact. Honkai Star Rail is now open for pre-registration. Just click the link in the description to do so. Honkai Star Rail is a free-to-play and cross-platform anime-style game with a wide assortment of beautifully designed characters, each with cool and unique weapons. For example, Herta uses a huge hammer that can shatter the earth below in epic fashion, while Yanqing surfs on a sword to attack. It just doesn't get cooler than that. I love the costume designs too, especially Himeko's. You know Sanji would love this game. Throw in beautifully animated cutscenes and breathtaking backgrounds, and you get an immersive experience with top-notch stories and music that make it feel like you're in an actual anime. There are even 4 language voiceovers to choose from, a detail which I love. Anime fans like me will be psyched to hear that there are a lot of familiar Japanese voice actors in this game. As mentioned, pre-registration has begun for this epic game, so what are you waiting for? Check out the game and pre-register now via my link below. Now let's start with some important background information about the crew before we get into the individual members. Initially, people started panicking when Kaido and Big Mom teamed up. The 2 Yonko teaming up led to worries of the return of Rocks. However, at the same time, more than a few of the Marine soldiers have never even heard of Rocks, according to Sengoku. Sengoku describes them as a collection of individuals who came together on Pirate Island years ago to make one big score. They were a fierce bunch, constantly killing one another within the group. In addition to their captain, Rocks Zebek, they also featured a young Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido. Sengoku makes it clear though that there were other Rocks members besides the 3 Yonko who went on to carve out a name for themselves. The Golden Lion, the Silver Axe, Captain John, Wang Ji, and more. The crew got along so terribly that not one of the former members actually wants to tell the tale of the Rocks Pirates. Sengoku lets us know that the ambition of Captain Rocks was to be king of the world, and the crew opened hostilities directly against the world government, like some kind of terrorist organization. As the government tends to do, it tried to cover up much of their deeds and to erase them from history. But at the time, everyone had heard of the threat they posed. 38 years ago, at an island called God Valley, the Rocks Pirates, known as the strongest crew in the world, were wiped out, according to the news reports at least. A rampaging force of evil that none had been able to stop had been taken down by a Navy Vice Admiral by the name of Garp. His name was heard across the world, and he was soon called a naval hero. So yes, his title, Hero of the Marines, actually dates back to this incident. Sengoku lets us know that Garp never wants to talk about this incident. One reason we're given, and this wasn't reported, is that Garp had to work with pirates, and the other we're given is that he protected celestial dragons through his actions. So in order to protect celestial dragons and their slaves at God Valley, Garp joined forces with Roger himself there at the island, and together they broke apart the Rocks Pirates. That is the God Valley incident as far as we know. Sengoku goes on to explain that you can't find God Valley on a map today, and that it vanished without a trace. Recently, we saw that Imu-sama can erase islands as he did with Lulusia, so God Valley may have been erased in a similar way. So because Rocks was so ambitious in his pursuits of being king of the world, and he broke too many of the world's taboos, an interesting detail, there is no information in the public about the Rocks Pirates. I definitely want to read that list of the taboos that Rocks broke. Sengoku described Captain Rocks, who led 3 of the 4 former Yonko as Roger's first and perhaps greatest foe. Rocks D. Zebek is also one of those rare pirates with the D initial. To be fair, Sengoku does say that 38 years ago, Kaido and Big Mom were nothing like they are now, implying that they've gotten considerably stronger. This does make sense since Kaido was still only an apprentice pirate at the time. However, Whitebeard 38 years ago was 36, so I feel like that sort of makes up for Kaido and Big Mom being younger at the time. Some other details to keep in mind are that the Rocks pirate flag included a red skull with horns. It has also been described as a burning skull. And in a flashback, people were in disbelief upon hearing that the Rocks pirates lost, and some even said it wasn't Garp or anyone else that overpowered them, it was just that they couldn't stand each other. No teamwork in the group was blamed, and since the event is shrouded in so much mystery, I think that's a valid possibility or at least a contributing factor. Another detail that must be mentioned is that despite not a lot of people knowing about the Rocks pirates nowadays, Blackbeard chose to name his ship the Saber of Zebek. So although Yonko Blackbeard was only 2 years old when the God Valley incident took place, it's clear that there is a connection there. In one way or another, 4 Yonko are connected to Zebek, and considering that Shanks was 1 year old at the time of the incident, he's not in the clear either. There have even been theories that he could have been Zebek's son, but for now it's enough to note that 3 Yonko worked under him and another chose to name his ship after him, and the other members of his crew were arguably no less special. So whether people remember the Rocks pirates or not, the legacy of the Rocks pirates is very much alive in the world of One Piece. In other words, the past is not dead, it's not even past. Now let's jump into the 9 known crew members. Number 1, Ochoku, also called Wang Zhi in the English translation. Wang Zhi was actually a famous Chinese pirate lord in our world in the 16th century. He was credited for spreading European firearms throughout East Asia and for his role in leading the first Europeans to reach Japan in 1543. So the name alone carries weight, but in One Piece, Wang Zhi is known as the previous ruler of Hachinosu, aka Pirate Island, also known as Full of Lead in the English translation. Pirate Island is famous. As mentioned, it was where the Rocks pirates met. So you know you gotta be capable to rule over such a famous hub for pirates. Blackbeard overthrew him, but that's not the surprising part. We know Blackbeard has become a powerhouse and is a sliver away from passing Shanks and becoming the current Yonko with the highest bounty. Even the Dark King Silver's Rayleigh himself said he'd lose nowadays against Blackbeard. So it's not shocking that he'd take Pirate Island from Wang Zhi. The shocking part is actually that he needed help. It happened during the Rocky Port incident, which happened during the time skip. It was perpetrated by Law. Most of the details about the incident are unknown. What we do know though was that Kobe became famous for being the hero who saved civilian lives in the Rocky Port incident. Furthermore, Blackbeard mentioned that Kobe helped him out in that incident. He says it was thanks to Kobe that he was able to topple Wang Zhi and make himself the boss of Pirate Island. So to me, this hypes up Wang Zhi, who is clearly a legend from old times, and yet Blackbeard still needed a Marine's help in taking him down. And of course, when one member of the Rocks pirates is hyped up, the whole crew is as well. Keep that in mind as we move forward. On a side note, how crazy is it that Oda can build up so much hype around an event that didn't even involve our main characters? If he ever came out with a side story that followed this incident from beginning to end, I would be all over it. But anyways, that's all we know about Wang Zhi so far, along with the fact that he was singled out by Sengoku, along with pirates like Shiki and Captain John, as being worth mentioning. Number 2, Captain John. Captain John went on to form his own crew after the Rocks pirates and is notable for his legendary treasure collection. He's deceased now, but Yonko Buggy is desperate to find his fabled treasure cave and the riches within. Aside for the One Piece itself, which we still don't know the nature of, this is the most hyped treasure in One Piece, and one that Buggy or Nami would no doubt be thrilled to find. After his death, John's corpse was sought after by Dr. Hogback because he was seen as being worthy enough to become one of the general zombies for Gecko Moria. Captain John's animated corpse makes quite the sight, as he has 2 swords stuck in his stomach from when he died. I'd love to get his backstory in manga form as well. Luckily, in an SBS, Oda did reveal at least part of his history. Captain John was described as being greedy and hateable, to the point that his own crew declared mutiny and killed him for it. The dude wanted to keep his large amount of treasure for himself and not to split it with his crew, so you can guess why they would be upset. Still, despite being taken down by multiple multiple stab wounds to the chest. Since he was sought after for the zombie general position, it can be assumed that he was a strong pirate in life. Notably, Luffy found John's armband among Moria's riches, not knowing it was a map to John's treasure. Eventually, he gave it to Buggy for the clown Yonko's assistance. So Buggy may well be the one to find Captain John's legendary loot. In fact, he previously thought it was on an island with a skull on it, but they didn't end up finding it. However, another island with a skull on it is Pirate Island, where the Rocks pirates were formed and where Blackbeard currently rules. So it could be that Captain John's treasure is there, and with the armband, Buggy may even know it now, but the fact that Blackbeard is on the island has prevented him from getting it so far. Number 3, Silver Axe. For now, we don't know much about Silver Axe, aside from the fact that he was singled out by Sengoku as a member who carved out a name for himself along with the Golden Lion, Captain John, and Wang Ji. Still, based on the company, we can assume he'll be brought up again in the story, and we'll figure out why he was worth mentioning here. For now, though, he's easily the member we know the least about. However, it speaks a lot that he could survive in this crew of monsters where killing each other was the norm. It's actually quite similar to how Blackbeard pit the most dangerous level 6 prisoners against each other in order to recruit those strong enough to survive. But more on that later. Number 4, Buckingham Stussy, aka Miss Buckin. Recent events in the manga, as we'll get into, have definitely served to hype up her character. At first, we knew her as this old, oddly shaped lady who was obsessed with Whitebeard. She was 38 at the time of the God Valley incident, and now she's 76. She claims that her 35-year-old son and former warlord Weevil was fathered by Whitebeard. This would mean that even if they met while being on the Rocks Pirates together, it was around 2 years after the God Valley incident that they would have conceived Edward Weevil, aka Whitebeard Jr. Honestly, as time goes on, I'm starting to believe Stussy's claims more and more. I mean, from the beginning, it can be argued that Weevil's mustache doesn't lie. His hair is also the same blonde color as Whitebeard's was back in the day. However, we also find out that Stussy is a self-styled scientist and is labeled by the narrator as a Mads freeloader. Notably, Mads was an illegal scientific research institute led by Vegapunk. This connection does suggest that Weevil might have been created in an unorthodox and scientific way while using Whitebeard's genes. However, it was recently revealed that CP0's agent Stussy is a clone of Miss Buckin. And it must be said, if Miss Buckin used to look like her, which is the implication, it's not hard to believe that Whitebeard would have succumbed to her advances. I mean, we've already seen that Sanji definitely would have. Now, from the looks of her clone, we can assume that Miss Buckin wasn't just attractive, but used to be a force to be reckoned with as well. We've seen her clone take out Lucci and Kaku effortlessly. Yes, she used sea stone lipstick to help incapacitate them, but still, it's impressive she succeeded in taking 2 Awakened Zone users out like that. The clone also has vampire-like wings and appears to suck blood, which in turn appears to drain victims of their energy and causes them to lose consciousness. This suggests that she might have some sort of vampire or, according to my comment section, succubus fruit. Of course, as we saw with the Seraphims, it's possible that the clone doesn't have the fruit, but they just added these fruit-like powers to her because Miss Buckin had the fruit. If this were the case, then Miss Buckin could have had these powers while on the Rocks crew, which would help explain how she survived in a crew full of monsters. Of course, it's possible that as an attractive woman, she was protected by Whitebeard or Rocks, but I think she could hold her own. After all, if she couldn't, why would they choose to clone her? Maybe she wasn't as physically strong, but her clone suggests that she more than made up for this by being strategic and ready to fight dirty against powerful men. So although Marco doesn't fully buy the fact that she was Whitebeard's lover, I'm believing it more and more. Not only was it nice seeing Weevil protect his father's hometown in chapter 1073, Stussy said Vegapunk could prove that her son and Whitebeard are related. Weevil, before Admiral Greenbull helped capture him, was said to have monstrous strength, which bodes well for him being the strongest man in the world's sun. Either way, this is a very interesting story thread, and I hope Marco will accept Weevil as Whitebeard's son eventually and help rescue him from the Marines. Stussy is also determined for Weevil to inherit the late Whitebeard's fortune, while Weevil really acts like a proud son, unlike Ace, and not only protected his father's hometown at great personal cost, he also proclaimed with tears in his eyes that he would kill Blackbeard for killing his father, while it was Stussy who told him that vengeance was foolish and that what they need is money. Number 5, Captain Rocks himself. It's hard to talk about the Rocks Pirates without covering the captain, so we went over a lot about him already while we were discussing the crew as a whole. As mentioned, he wanted to become king of the world. He somehow got all of these monstrous people to follow him as their ruler, and he was no doubt strong and not just a figurehead. We know this because when Kaido thought of the few people that could challenge him in strength, he thought of Odin, Whitebeard, Roger, Shanks, and of course Captain Rocks himself. The great question is, what happened happened to Rocks D. Zebek? Could a guy who could not only survive in a crew like the Rocks Pirates but even rule over it actually be killed at God Valley, or did he survive? One intriguing theory is that he succeeded in becoming king of the world and is actually Imu-sama controlling things behind the scenes. Another popular theory is that he could be Dragon's biological father. This would mean that Garp is Luffy's maternal grandfather and that Dragon adopted his wife's last name like Ace adopted his mother's. Then there's the possibility that Shanks could be his son, or the possibility that Blackbeard is in some way his successor, whether that be in philosophy or in a more specific and scientific way. I personally feel like Rocks could have been the previous Dark Fruit user, and that's one of the reasons Blackbeard wanted it so bad. And yes, I just mentioned a lot of theories and all of them may be off the mark, but as fans we can't help but obsess over such a legendary yet mysterious figure who was strong enough to rule over so many powerful and legendary pirates. He had his own era before the rise of the Pirate King. I mean, imagine how strong you must be in order to make marine hero Garp willing to team up with pirates in order to defeat you. Considering all of this, it's not at all surprising that Sengoku said Rocks could have been Roger's greatest foe. And if Rocks truly died back there at God Valley, then it begs the question, would he have successfully toppled the existing world order if Roger and Garp didn't thwart his attack against the Celestial Dragons? Chances are he would have, and that begs the question, why did Garp, who doesn't like Celestial Dragons, save them? Can't wait to find out, but for now, let's move on to number 6, Shiki the Golden Lion. Even though he was a subordinate in this crew, Shiki was also great enough to be considered one of the Pirate King's greatest rivals. When confronted with Shiki and his fleet, Buggy, despite being on Roger's crew, begged for Roger to give Shiki what he wanted. Shiki even wanted Roger to be his right-hand man. This clash between the two legends ended up being known as the Battle of Ed War. Shiki had the largest pirate fleet around at the time, and Roger was in a desperate situation and was only saved by raging weather. And even though the weather caused half of Shiki's ships to sink, the battle was still declared a draw, showing how even a subordinate of Rocks could later do this well with his own crew against the future Pirate King. During this battle, Shiki got the iconic wheel stuck in his head. Shiki was so mad when he heard Roger was captured later that he went to free him. It took Sengoku and Garp to stop him, and the three fought until Marineford was half destroyed, and he still turned out to be fine afterwards. Then 2 years later, Shiki broke out of Impel Down by cutting off his own feet. In other words, he did what Zoro was prepared to do, but to be fair, it did make more sense for Shiki, who has the float fruit, which allows him to make himself and non-living things he comes into contact with levitate. He can make big ships or vast island areas float, and even make a large amount of water float around someone in order to drown them. Rayleigh takes note of his escape from Impel Down, and then Shiki even goes to visit fellow former Rocks Pirate member Whitebeard. He proclaims that this is Whitebeard's age now, but Shiki will lie low for a while and then show people what a real pirate is like. Shiki felt convinced that with Roger's help, the two of them could have conquered the world together, like his Captain Rocks wanted to do. The movie with him is non-canon, so we won't focus on that here, but we'll see if he appears again in the main canon story. Either way, the dude is yet another legendary figure of One Piece, up there with Roger and Whitebeard, and as such he really serves to hype up the Rocks Pirates, and even more so to hype up their leader, who he too at one point served under. Number 7, Whitebeard. And so we've arrived at the final 3 members of this legendary crew, the 3 future Yonko, or past Yonko depending on how you look at it. Yes, Whitebeard 2, the man whose era Shiki said it was, the man called strongest in the world, and the man said to be closest to the One Piece, also once served Rocks as a member of the Rocks Pirates. He was 36 years old at the time of the God Valley incident. He too was considered one of Roger's greatest rivals like Rocks and Shiki, and man, I gotta say, Roger had some crazy rivals. Makes sense for the Pirate King, I guess. After Roger died, Whitebeard was left with the highest bounty at 5.046 billion, which also happens to be the second highest bounty of any pirate in history. Whitebeard possessed the Gura Gura no Mi, aka the Tremor fruit. Oda stated that this fruit was the strongest paramecia fruit. Sengoku proclaims at one point that with this devil fruit, Whitebeard has the power to destroy the world. The power lets Whitebeard produce shockwaves that can travel through practically anything, air, water, and land. The shockwaves can cause tsunamis and earthquakes. The shockwaves can be unpredictable, so allies have to be cautious around the user and not get in his way. Whitebeard was able to split an island in half, creating a giant chasm to separate the pirates on one side from the marines on the other. He uses the power to destroy the Navy headquarters, but the power is not limitless. The Navy has has created walls stronger than steel that won't shatter as a result of the Gura Gura no Mi. Whitebeard can create vibrations around himself to protect himself as well. Because of this ability, Aokiji can't freeze him. Whitebeard can concentrate his power into a small orb or quake bubble around his hand to increase its power. He can create contained but powerful explosion type attacks. He used this attack to beat a giant vice admiral with one blow. He destroyed his helmet like it was nothing. He can surround his spear with a quake bubble and use it to extend its reach. He can mow down enemies far away in this fashion. Perhaps the most intriguing power is Whitebeard's ability to grab the air and pull it. By doing this, he tilted the entire battlefield at Marineford. Notably, when Whitebeard was younger and stronger, his haki was strong enough to match that of the Pirate Kings. Without even touching, the clash of haki alone created insanely strong winds. And I haven't spoken about Conqueror's haki yet because not a lot is known about a lot of the Rocks crew members. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Rocks Pirates had the most Conqueror's haki users in one crew ever. We know Whitebeard possessed Conqueror's haki, same with Big Mom and Kaido, and it's hard to believe that they were the only ones in this star-studded crew. Even though it hasn't been confirmed, Rocks D. Zebek has to be a user of Conqueror's haki, or at least I'd like to think so if he could rule over so many Conqueror's haki users. Whitebeard did eventually die at 72 years old, but like a true boss, he remained standing nonetheless. He was old and sick, so despite how impressive he was at Marineford, we should keep in mind that this was not Whitebeard in his prime. Number 8, Big Mom. Big Mom was 30 years old during the God Valley incident, but even at 24 years old, she was a member of the famous Rocks crew. This is actually when she met a 15-year-old Kaido who was teaming up with the crew for the first time. She comes off as a sort of protective big sister figure to him, since at one point she said for him to just tell her if he has any trouble. Kaido also remembers her saying she was going to be king of the sea. According to Big Mom, Kaido is indebted to her. She gave him his epic mythical zone fruit back during the God Valley incident. Anyways, the now 68-year-old Big Mom, aka Charlotte Linlin, as a Yonko clashed evenly with the so-called strongest creature in the world at the time, Kaido. Her own bounty was 4.388 billion berries, but I can't see it staying the same after her defeat to Law and Kid. Big Mom, and this goes for Kaido too, definitely doesn't come off as calculating and patient as someone like Blackbeard does. She has been known to destroy entire countries over sweets. Almost everyone, including her own children, fears her when she's angry. She was born powerful rather than trying to become powerful. When she was 5, she accidentally killed a large bear by smacking it. She even broke the bones of a giant by trying to slap a mosquito. Her overpoweredness seemed more like an annoyance than a goal, at least in the beginning. Even as a kid, she could break a skilled giant's sword with her fist and then defeat him. I could keep going, but you get the point. She's very, very strong, and she was so from the beginning. Her devil fruit is a paramecia type called Soru Soru no Mi, aka Soul Soul Fruit. The fruit allows her to take the soul of whoever she touches and take years away from their lifespan. Obviously, if she takes enough years, the victim will die right then and there. The ability is super overpowered on paper, but there is a loophole. If you have no fear of death, you will not be affected by the devil fruit powers. Thus, if you want to even hope to stand a chance against her, you better have self-mastery over yourself and your fear. She can also put souls into inanimate objects or animals. These newly anthropomorphized beings are known as homies, and you could see them all around Toto Land. It's noteworthy that Big Mom cannot put souls into corpses or other people. The fruit can also produce little incarnations of pure soul that go around collecting and distributing souls for Big Mom. Big Mom used parts of her soul to create 3 special homies, later 4 as we'll see, that are far more powerful than the rest. These homies include Zeus, the thundercloud, and is summoned by her left hand, Prometheus, the sun, that is summoned by her right, and Napoleon, who takes the form of Big Mom's hat. The sun can create flames, the cloud can create lightning bolts, and together they can manipulate the weather. It should be noted that recently Zeus, who's been more associated with Nami as of late than Big Mom, has been replaced by a new thundercloud homie called Hera. Big Mom's hat can turn into a blade that she can wield and that can move and attack by itself. Her hat can also relay information to her that it receives from the other homies. Homies like clouds can be ridden on and allow Big Mom to travel at high speeds. Prometheus can also engulf Napoleon in flames, increasing the power of the sword. Furthermore, the sword can release powerful destructive shockwaves. Most recently, during her fight against Law and Kid, she used a year of her own lifespan to increase her power even further. She gets even bigger, more godlike as she dominates the panel compared to the now insect-looking kid-in-law. It's an ace in the hole that she doesn't use often, but as she mentioned, it has been decades since she's felt pain like the pain kid-in-law delivered to her, so she feels it's warranted. She also uses the Master Saber combination of Prometheus, Hera, and Napoleon to create Misery, an even more powerful homie. The giant powerful homie can fly around quickly while launching fire or lightning attacks. In short, Big Mom and her powers are definitely larger than life. Big Mom can also use Conqueror's Haki, as mentioned. However, the combined awakened powers of Law and Kid were just too much for her. I don't think she's dead, but she was defeated. And in a sense, her fight was less fair than Kaido's because she was double teamed, while Kaido, at least at the end, was fighting a one-on-one fight. Number 9, Rock's apprentice pirate, Kaido. As covered, Kaido joined the Rocks Pirates at 15 years old. It was actually Whitebeard who invited him to join the crew after witnessing Kaido overpowering other pirates on Pirate Island. Then he'd meet Big Mom, who would become a protective older sister to him. During the God Valley incident, Kaido was 21, and this was when Big Mom gave him the Uo Uo no Mi model Seryu, aka the Fish Fruit model Azure Dragon. More on the mythical fruit in a bit. Even before the Rocks Pirates though, like Big Sis Big Mom, Kaido stood out as being monstrously strong. At 10, he was the strongest soldier of the Vodka Kingdom. Kaido was so strong and confident in himself that he'd let himself be caught by the Marines so that he could eat their food and then he'd escape again when he felt like it. More recently, the 59-year-old man was referred to as the strongest creature in the world, at least he was before he fell to Yonko Luffy. His bounty was 4.6111 billion berries, meaning he had the highest known bounty of any living character before he was defeated by Luffy. People often used to say that if it's a one-on-one battle, Kaido will win. When Whitebeard was alive, Kaido actually tried to attack him, but Shanks interfered. Clearly, Kaido was not only strong, but brave as well. Brave enough to go after Whitebeard, that is, but how Shanks got him to turn around has yet to be revealed. He was first introduced to us as a man searching for a place to die. We are told that he's been caught by the Navy or enemy ships no less than 18 times, but now at least we know that some of those times, if not all of them, he was looking for food. He was tortured time and time again, we're told, and lived as a prisoner. When they tried to hang him, the rope snapped. When they put him under the guillotine, the blade cracked. Then he attempted to take his own life by jumping off from Sky Island, but he survived. Not even Kaido could take down Kaido, that's how invincible he seemed. And as with Big Mom, I think he's still alive, but more on that later. Anyways, I don't know if there's been a better introduction to an OP character than this. Kaido isn't strong because he wants to be. He practically views his overpoweredness as an annoyance, which is pretty hilarious. He has a reputation for being unable to die despite his best efforts. The first fight against Kaido and Luffy was a significant one. We are used to protagonists fighting, struggling, but ultimately overcoming their opponents. However, this is not what happens during this first fight. Luffy hits Kaido with many attacks and Kaido is ultimately not hurt by it. Then Kaido hits Luffy with his club once and Luffy is out cold. It's refreshing to see that pure willpower isn't enough to overpower a strong opponent sometimes. It doesn't happen often in shonen manga, but Kaido was able to brutally embarrass our shonen protagonist, and that shows how strong and special he was. It took Luffy mastering a higher level of Haki, specifically the ability to emit Haki rather than just coating his body in Haki, and awakening his God Fruit to finally beat Kaido. And again, I don't think he's dead, but he was definitely defeated. Some people even say that Kaido took a bunch of damage beforehand, and that's the only reason Luffy won. I'm not of that opinion personally, but it's true that he did take damage from the Scabbards, Yamato, Zoro, and so on before Luffy eventually beat him with his awakened fruit. Now let's get into Kaido's Devil Fruit, which is definitely one of my favorites. It's a mythical zone type fruit. As mentioned, it's called the Uo Uo no Mi model Seryu, aka the Fish Fruit model Azure Dragon. As a Fish Fruit, it raises huge questions. Like, was Kaido unable to end himself because he could even breathe in the sea, even if he may have been paralyzed like other fruit users? Also, if you didn't know, the reason Kaido looks like a dragon despite having the Fish Fruit is because it's based on the Dragon Gate myth, where if a carp made it up nearly an impossible to climb waterfall, it would become a dragon. Think Magikarp and Gyarados from Pokemon. The fruit allows him to transform into a giant, and I mean giant blue eastern dragon. He also has a hybrid form that he seems to use most often during the course of an intense battle. He can shoot heat blasts from his dragon mouth that can cause devastating damage. He can create slices of wind that can cut off limbs, tornadoes, lightning, and even hail in the video games. His ace in the hole is a technique that allows him to surround his whole dragon body in fire, so that he melts everything that comes into contact with him. The only known way to beat him in this case is through Haki mastery. If Luffy couldn't emit his Haki, he would have had to touch Kaido with his final attack, in which case he would have certainly lost due to the intense heat. We also saw Kaido clashing with fellow Yonko Big Mom. As with Luffy, they both use Conqueror's Haki. When Kaido and Big Mom clashed, the heavens split open, just like when Whitebeard and Shanks clashed. That sort of seems like a sign of Yonkohood when you can do that against a fellow Yonko. Interestingly enough, Kaido and Big Mom seem to be pretty evenly matched in their battle. They eventually decided to team up together and take over the world, so in a way they wanted to finish what Rocks started. You see that wish to take over the world in quite a few Rocks pirates. It definitely seems to be a common theme and desire in the crew. After that, these two plan to finish their fight to the death. However, as we saw, they were defeated by the combined forces of Luffy, Law, and Kid before that could happen. So as you can see, a lot of Rocks Pirates members came to power even after the crew was disbanded. Now, some have fallen like Kaido, Whitebeard, and Big Mom, and yet the Rocks Pirates remain relevant. Literally just recently, as of writing this, it came out that Stussy, who's very relevant in the story right now, is a clone of the Rocks Pirate member who herself is relevant now after her son got taken hostage by Green Bull. Weevil is like a Rocks Pirate's child himself, since he seemingly came from two members of the crew, while others are probably connected in ways to the legendary crew that we still don't understand. At the very least, Oda made it clear that Blackbeard is carrying on the Rocks way. You can see this in not only his ship being called the Saber of Zebek, but as mentioned, in the way he also prioritized the strength of his crew members and encouraged them to kill each other so only the strongest would join his crew. And after going over all of these characters and their incredible feats and powers, I hope everyone listening can fully appreciate how powerful the Rocks Pirates were, and specifically how powerful Rocks D. Zebek must have been, the man who ruled over all of these legendary monsters. If you're curious about his successor, Blackbeard, and want to learn more about their connection, then you don't want to miss my all 16 Blackbeard Pirates and their powers explained video, link in the description and on screen right now.